The next type that I want to look at is enum. So if you come from a programming background, maybe you've heard of enum in some other languages like Python or Java, and they work the same way. They're pretty much label that you can use instead of using some number or something like that. And I'm going to show you an example real quick. So to define an enum, you type the keyword enum and then you give it a name starting with an uppercase. So let's say I'm defining some role and then opening and closing curly braces. And then in there, I can have something like, let's say role underscore user. And then I can have role underscore admin, for example. And then I can have role, let's say sysadmin. So now I can go down, let's say I'm defining a user. So I can see let user, and then I'm going to give it a type. So I'm going to put colon, and then I'm going to put opening and closing curly braces. And let's say the user is going to have a name that's going to be a string. And the user is going to have a role that's going to be of type role. So I can just do that. So now I can go down and say the user now is going to equal an object because it's an object. And I can say the name is going to be a string. So I can just pass in my name here. And then for the role, so I'm going to say role. Now we can access the role enum that we defined. So I can say access my role enum, and then I can access one of the enum definition that I have inside of this enum class. So let's say I am an admin, so I can select role admin. Now, if I go ahead and log this out, so I'm going to do console.log and then log out the user. What's going to happen is we're going to have an object. The name is going to be junior and the role is not going to be role admin. That's because by default, when you define an enum like this in TypeScript, there is an index that is assigned to each of your enum. And by default, it's going to give the first one the index of 0 and then the next one index of 1 and so on and so forth. So if I go down and run this, you should see junior and then 1. You can see it here. And that can be very useful if you have an application and then you say, you know, role 1 is going to be role admin, role 0 is going to be role user, and then role 2 is going to be role sysadmin. So instead of using numbers, you're using actual names that, you know, as developer, as humans, we can actually read and understand. And another thing you can do is you can change the index. So for instance, I can go to the first one and I can give it an index of 5. So because I do that, then the next one is going to have an index of 6. And then the next one after that is going to have an index of 7 and so on and so forth if I had more enum definition after these 3. So if I go ahead and run this now, you're going to see that we have 6 instead of 1 that we had before. And we can even take this a step further and then define these as strings. So I can do instead of a number, let's say I want to say this is user. And then I can go down and then I can say this is, say, admin, and then say this is the sysadmin. And that would work just fine. Now, instead of giving us a number, it's going to give us the string that we define here. So if I go ahead and run this, you can see now we get the string admin. And we can mix and match as well. So I can say for the role user, it's going to be a string of user. And then for the role admin, let's say I put in some random number like 7. So if I run this now, you can see that my role is now 7. So enum are very, very useful. I use them a lot when I'm trying to, pass in the roles of users from the back end to the front end. And I also use them a lot when I'm trying to manage the state of my application. So I can have like an enum. So let me give you a quick example. I can go down here and then I say this is my state. So I would define something like app state, just like that. I'm going to remove all this. And then I can have something like loading underscore state, and I'm going to duplicate this 2 times, and I can say here is going to be the loaded state, and you can have something like ready state, just like that. So I would have something like this, and I can set them equal to a number or set them equal to a string, and then I can use this to manage the application state when I'm working on the front end. So when my data is loading, then I'm in the loading state. When the data is loaded, then I'm in the loaded state. And when the data is ready to be shown to the user, then I'm in the ready state. So they're very, very useful. And I really use them a lot. Every time I'm building an application, trying to design the application, I'm like, okay, for the front end, for this specific part, I think I'm going to use an enum. So they're very useful, and they're used a lot in application development, both in the back end and the front end. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to admin. I want this. Well, you would also have this in uppercase, by the way. So let's do this. Let's put everything in uppercase. I mean, you can have them in lowercase too. I don't think there is like a convention for them to be uppercase or lowercase, but it can be anything you want. Now, if I run this one more time, you can see that now my role is admin. So this is a lot better and it's a lot cleaner instead of using like a string like this, like, you know, would use some string like this. Because when you use the enum, then you make sure that it's only going to be one of your defined enum in your enum class. So if someone else is working on the application, they can't make a mistake instead of passing a string that was like role admin and then they put an extra S here or something like that, because you type this as this enum. So the values that this user can have will be one of the enum that you define in your class. So it makes it a lot cleaner and a lot better when you're developing application.